Don't let your shaking hands harm my child.
You are so selfish.
Would you ever drag your own child to court? In the slums of Ajegunle, a mother who once sold peanuts and fetched water to survive just sued her billionaire son, and the entire city of Lagos is in shock. The truth few people know is this. Behind his billion-dollar empire, she was the silent co-founder. She pawned her wedding earrings to buy his first textbooks, but years later, she was told to stay out of family pictures because she didn't fit the company's image. This is a real story, based on court documents and the voice of Mama Nkechi herself, a woman who hid golden shares and loan agreements in a wooden box under her bed, never knowing they'd one day become the keys to a courtroom battle. Watch this to discover how a pawn ticket crushed a top-tier legal team, how a mother with no legal training won a historic verdict, and what it truly means when love is tested by power. Chikezi, the son she raised from poverty, collapsed in tears when she presented the pawn receipt in court, the earrings she traded to buy his future. If you've ever believed that a mother's love is unconditional, watch this, because sometimes even a mother must speak in the language of justice. And after this, you may never see your own mother the same way again. Rain lashed the rusted tin roof like a fury unleashed, metal groaning under the weight of water and time. In the pitch-dark maze of Ajegunle, where alleys wept and gutters overflowed with the filth of forgotten days, a woman staggered beneath two sloshing buckets, the rope cut into her shoulder, already bruised, already purple. Her hands, raw, trembling, gripped the wooden yoke tighter. One more turn, just one more round. She didn't scream. She never screamed. Nkechi Afolayan moved like the night itself, bent, soaked, invisible, a trail of blood smeared across her palm. She didn't look. The pain had long since become part of her, like her breath, like her silence. She passed a group of children huddled under a broken street lamp, their faces streaked with soot and rain, some bare feet deep in the muddy water. One of them lit a match, shielding the flame like it was holy. Another boy coughed until he doubled over. She paused, eyes on them, steady, then quietly. My son won't end up here. She moved again. Ajegunle didn't sleep, not really. It murmured through the night, the clatter of pots, the distant quarrel of drunks, a child's cry, the sharp clang of something metal falling. Water dripped rhythmically off a torn awning, and rats skittered in the shadows. She turned into the narrow lane behind the mosque, feet splashing through puddles as wide as sins. Her home stood at the end, a patchwork of cement, tin, and stubbornness. A single bulb flickered near the door, weak, yellow, buzzing like a dying insect. She set the buckets down. Her breath came short, shallow. Her back screamed, but her fingers reached into the threadbare pocket of her blouse, feeling for the tiny pouch. It was still there, a pouch made from the lining of her wedding dress, long since faded to gray. Inside, wrapped in a corner of a checkered handkerchief, were two silver earrings, dull, nicked, old. The only thing her late husband had left behind that didn't rot, rust, or run. She opened the front door. Inside, the one-room shack smelled of damp wood and old oil. On the floor, curled beneath a mosquito net, her son slept. His face was soft in rest, young, but sharper now, 17. Almost a man. Books lay scattered near his feet, one open on a page of geometry, lines and angles drawn over and over. She smiled barely. He stirred slightly but did not wake. Nkechi stepped over the broken tile, pulled a cloth over him, and sat. She lit a candle. Her fingers hovered above a plastic bag beneath the bed, half filled with old bread, plantain chips, and salt. Travel food. She added another item, dried fish wrapped in newspaper. Then she slid the earrings into her breast pocket, stood again, and left. She didn't look back. The pawn shop sat between a shuttered bakery and a kiosk that sold expired biscuits. The sign had long lost its paint. Inside, a man with a cap too tight and eyes too tired watched her approach. He didn't greet her. No one greeted anyone at that hour. The rain muffled everything. She unwrapped the handkerchief and laid the earrings on the counter. He looked at them, then at her. She said nothing. He took them, weighed them, tested them with a scratch of metal, nodded once. She watched as he slid a slip of paper toward her. An official-looking BN folded twice. She picked it up carefully, as if it might tear the air. Then, without another word, she turned, walked into the rain again. The receipt held tightly in her fist like a secret that burned. Back home, she waited for dawn. When the muezzin called the first prayer, she placed the receipt between pages of a tattered Bible, Exodus, chapter 2, and pressed her palm flat on it. Deliverance comes in strange ways, she whispered. Morning came, gray and cold. The streets were still wet. Vendors shouted under umbrellas. Children raced barefoot through puddles. Nkechi stood before her son with a bundle wrapped in brown paper. For the exam, she said. Chikezi frowned. Where did you get? She cut him off. God provides. He didn't push. He knew the look in her eyes. He touched the package, then embraced her tight, as if afraid she might disappear. The next days moved like fog. Study, prayer, quiet meals, and then the letter. He had won it. A full scholarship. Overseas. A school in England. A place so far away it felt like a fairy tale. The whole street gathered when the news spread, clapping, singing, some even crying. Ajegunle's pride, they chanted. Fly high, boy. Someone gave him a suitcase with peeling stickers and a cracked handle. Another slipped a folded 5 naira note into his pocket. There were back slaps, bear hugs, awkward jokes. Nkechi stood in the corner, clutching her fabric sack, face unreadable. She smiled, but not with her eyes. At the farewell party in the church basement, beneath a torn poster of Psalm 91, the music blared. Jollof rice steamed in plastic coolers. Boys danced. Girls giggled. Chikezi laughed more than he had in weeks. No one noticed when Nkechi slumped into a chair in the far corner, hand pressed to her stomach. Her breath came shallow. Her skin pale. They said it was just the excitement. They didn't know she hadn't eaten in 3 days. They didn't know she had sold her last wrapper for rice. They didn't know she had been walking, not taking the bus, saving the money for fruit and crackers to pack in his bag. At Lagos Airport, the sun blinked through heavy clouds. The plane stood like a white giant waiting to devour him whole. Chikezi held her hand one last time. She reached into the sack and handed him the food wrapped in a scarf. For when you miss home, she said. He nodded, eyes red. Then the gate swallowed him. She watched the plane rise, watched it tear through the sky like a miracle in motion. When it vanished, she looked down at the ground. There at her feet, the old suitcase they hadn't used. She bent, touched it, whispered, "Go, my son. I will remain with this land." Her ears were bare. For the first time in 20 years, the earrings were gone, but her hands held the memory of them. Cold, circular, weighty, like rings of sacrifice. The rain began again, but she did not move. She let it soak her skin, wash over her cheeks, mingle with the sweat and the tears, until all of it became one. And for the first time, she allowed herself to ache, not for herself, not even for her son, but for the kind of love that gives everything and keeps nothing, a love that disappears quietly, so another might rise. The cheers rang so loud they bounced off the rusted roofs like fireworks. Ajegunle, dirty, crumbling, flooded, was for once alive with something purer than survival. Laughter, celebration, pride. Chikazi don makam. The shout echoed down alleys. Women banged spoons on cooking pots. Boys climbed trees to wave paper flags. Somewhere, someone lit a match and threw it into the sky like it might become a star. Chikazi stood awkwardly in the middle of it all, clutching a faded letter in both hands. His name, full and official, was printed in block letters on crisp white paper. Beneath it, stamped with red ink and gold foil, University of Leeds, Department of Engineering, full international scholarship. A woman burst out of a kiosk with a bright orange suitcase. It was missing a wheel. She shoved it into his arms. "Go high, Ajegunle boy," she laughed, and others roared approval. Another man passed him a biro to sign the suitcase like a football jersey. Someone else pressed a plastic-wrapped meat pie into his palm. And all around him voices sang. He tried to smile, but his eyes kept searching the edge of the crowd. She stood beneath the neem tree, barely visible. Her blouse was clean but faded. Her wrapper matched, but her sandals were wet and split. Nkechi held a cloth bag to her chest like a shield, watching, not waving. Her son's eyes met hers. She nodded, only once, then disappeared into the shadows behind the mechanic's shack. That night, under a low ceiling and a single flickering bulb, she folded his clothes carefully into the orange suitcase. 2 shirts, a sweater with missing buttons, jeans, underwear, a necktie someone donated at church. Then, beside them, she added the packet of dried food wrapped in cloth, the same bundle she'd spent weeks piecing together, and a plastic bag of powdered Gary tucked deep in the corner. He came in quietly, barefoot. "Ma," he said, voice low, "they want me to speak at the send-off, tomorrow." She didn't turn. "You should." "I don't know what to say." "You'll find the words when it matters," she said. "But don't speak for them. Speak for yourself." He hesitated. "Will you be there?" She didn't answer, only tightened the bag and zipped the case. He walked over, touched her elbow. "Will you?" Her voice was calm. "I'll be close." The send-off was held in the church's concrete yard the next afternoon. Plastic chairs were arranged in crooked rows. Bunting fluttered from the pulpit to the gutter. A borrowed speaker crackled with gospel songs no one really listened to. They dressed him in a second-hand jacket too big at the shoulders. A neighbor's daughter tied a ribbon around his suitcase handle. A teenage boy wrote in marker, "Fly high, Ajegunle boy," across the top flap. There was dancing. Preachers gave thanks. Local politicians who hadn't paid their rent in months took turns pretending they'd sponsored him. They called him our golden son, our hope, our proof that dreams live here. Nkechi sat at the back, under a crooked umbrella, hands folded. She looked smaller than usual. A scarf hid most of her hair. He scanned the crowd, trying to catch her eye. She looked down, and then the music grew louder. People clapped, and he was pulled onto the makeshift stage. He stood behind the microphone, looked at the sea of expectant faces, then at the woman beneath the umbrella. She nodded again. He spoke. That night, as the last of the visitors drifted home, as the leftover rice cooled in cracked bowls, Nkechi stood alone in the kitchen space behind their shack. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Not truly. She counted the coins she'd hidden in the tin under the sink. Not enough for a proper meal. Not enough for anything, really, but enough for one final purchase. She walked to the corner stall and bought a boiled egg and 2 sachets of water, wrapped the egg in a piece of newspaper and slipped it into the food bag in the suitcase. Back home, she locked the door, pulled the Bible from the high shelf. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Exodus again, and removed the folded pawnshop slip. She held it up to the candlelight, then pressed it flat again and returned it to its hiding place. At 4 a.m. she began walking. The first bus to Lagos left at 5. They rode in silence, mother and son. His head against the window, her hand on his bag. At the terminal he turned to her. "Are you okay, Ma?" "Of course," she said. "This is the day the Lord has made." She adjusted his collar, smoothed his shirt, reached into her sack and pulled out a new pair of socks. "Dry feet, warm heart," she said, placing them in his hand. "Remember that when it rains." He laughed quietly. Then the call came. Boarding. He hugged her. A long, desperate kind of hug that tried to say what he couldn't. She held on tighter, and then he was gone. She watched the plane taxi down the runway, its body gleaming silver in the weak sun. Slowly, it rose into the clouds, slicing through them like a silent promise. When the sky was empty again, she looked around. The orange suitcase sat by her feet. Confused, she unzipped it. Empty. She checked the tag. It wasn't his. She stumbled backward, clutching the suitcase like a wounded bird. People passed. Voices buzzed. But she heard none of it. Her legs gave out, and she sat on the bench outside the terminal, blinking hard. Then it hit her. She had accidentally picked up the wrong bag during the commotion at the entrance. Her own orange case, her son's case, was gone. She opened this one. Inside, children's clothes, a pink dress, a toy elephant. She laughed, soft at first, then bitterly, then not at all. She sat for an hour, the suitcase beside her. When the guards came, they asked if she was lost. She said no, then slowly stood, left the wrong suitcase on the bench, and walked away. Back in Ajegunle, everything was the same. The sky gray, the gutters full, the street boys shouting. But something inside her had shifted. She unlocked the door to her home. It smelled of candle smoke and silence. She folded her scarf, unwrapped her feet, and sat by the window. And there it was, his old ragged suitcase, the one with "Fly High Ajegunle Boy" written in black ink. He must have taken the new one. She placed a hand on it, then on her heart. Somewhere over the clouds, her son was flying. And here, in the place that never changed, she whispered, "Fly high, my son. I will remain with the earth." She looked down at her hands, the lines in them, the old scars, the calluses. Her ears were still bare. The earrings were gone, but her soul still full, and her silence now sacred. The black car didn't belong in Ajegunle. It moved too smooth, too slow, like a question gliding through a crowded room. Children stopped mid-chase. Vendors paused mid-shout. The sun bounced off its windshield like it wasn't from here, like it had never known dust. When the door opened, a leather shoe touched cracked pavement. Then another. Legs in pressed trousers stepped down, followed by a hand adjusting a gold watch. And finally, Chikizi. But he wasn't the boy they remembered. His skin was still deep brown, but his face had angles now. His shoulders had widened. His voice, when he greeted the bystanders, was polished, trimmed at the edges. "Mama de house?" he asked a nearby woman. She just nodded, too stunned to speak. He turned to the driver. 10 minutes. Keep it running." The woman called out as he passed. "You remember me? I sell a car near your school." He smiled faintly. "Of course, Auntie. God bless you." He walked the rest alone. Footsteps muffled on the dirt path. The air was thick with the smell of palm oil, heat, and yesterday's rain. At the end of the street stood the house, smaller than he remembered, but unchanged. Time had curled its corners and chipped its walls, but it stood. He stopped at the threshold, then knocked once lightly. The door creaked, and there she was, Nkechi. She looked thinner, slower, but her eyes, those eyes, still carried storms. Chi, ki, zai, she whispered. He smiled. Yes, Ma, I'm home. They didn't hug. She stepped aside and he entered. He looked around the room. The same oil lamp on the shelf, the same woven mat near the corner, the suitcase, his old one, still there, tucked beneath the window, and near the wall a wooden box. He set down the gift bag he had brought, filled with chocolate, a perfume bottle, a folded scarf. She didn't touch it. You shouldn't have come without telling me, she said. I wanted to surprise you. Surprises are for weddings, not for mothers with weak hearts. He laughed. She didn't. He tried again. I brought you something. I mean, many things. And Mama, I have news. She looked up. I've started my own company. Her eyes softened, but only a little. And it's called Zionlink, logistics, imports, expansion plans across Africa. She nodded slowly. I started it small, but now we have 30 staff. Offices in Lekki, Abuja next. Still no reaction. Then his voice dropped. But none of it would exist without you. She blinked. Remember, years ago, when I was trying to raise the first capital? No bank would give a student a loan. Her hand tensed. I asked you to sign something, a proxy form, to hold temporary shares, so I could qualify as a local investor. I didn't think. I remember, she said. His breath caught. You do? I kept everything you ever signed. He stared. She stood, walked to the shelf, pulled down the wooden box. His heart skipped. She placed it on the floor, sat beside it, opened it. Inside, neatly wrapped, paper after paper, receipts, certificates, stamped envelopes, and on top, an old pawn ticket, faded but intact. He reached for it. She stopped him. Not yet. He looked up. Her eyes had darkened. Do you know what this is? He nodded. The earrings. I remember. She pulled another paper. This? His brow furrowed. My original share certificate. She placed it down. Another document followed, typed, signed, sealed. Convertible loan agreement. From your mother. No interest, no expiry, but binding. He didn't speak. She added the last one. He'd never seen it before. A single page, heavy paper, golden seal. What is this? He asked. She said it gently. Golden share. He swallowed. Meaning, I hold the right to override any decision, any sale, any vote, until death, or until I say otherwise. He stood. I didn't know. I didn't think. You didn't ask. Silence. She reached back into the box, pulled out something small, the earrings. Not the real ones, but a pair, silver-coated, bought cheap, shiny, and hollow. She placed them in his hand. I bought these last week, not for me. I can't wear them anymore. His fingers curled around them. But I want you to remember what real silver costs. He knelt beside her. I came to take you with me. I bought a house, Mama, Lekki Phase 1, quiet street. Garden in the back. She smiled faintly. You bought it? Or we did? He looked away. I don't care what's on paper, he said. You're my mother. Her hand touched his cheek. I'm your mother, and I remember. Later that week, the neighborhood gathered again. But this time, no one sang. No one danced. They watched in awe as a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up beside the old shack. Nkechi stepped out first, in a modest blouse and new wrapper. Chikezi followed, dressed sharp, holding an umbrella over her. They drove to Lekki in silence. The gate to the compound swung open like a mouth welcoming royalty. Palm trees lined the driveway. The house, white walls, arched windows, 2 floors, stood like a promise fulfilled. She said nothing. Inside, marble floors, leather couches, a kitchen with buttons she didn't understand, a room prepared for her, with curtains the color of sky. She sat on the edge of the bed. Chikezi hovered by the door. "It's yours." She looked around, then said only, "I need a broom." He blinked. "Why?" "To sweep the front step." He laughed, confused. "We have housekeepers." She nodded. "I still need a broom." Later, as the sun set and lights flickered on across Lekki, she stepped out onto the front porch, broom in hand. She swept the tiles slowly, rhythmically. People passed by in their SUVs. Some waved, others stared. But she kept sweeping, not to clean the floor, but to remember who she was. In her old house, she swept to survive. Here she swept to remind herself that she still lived. Inside the room, the wooden box rested on a shelf, unopened. The earrings, the contracts, the share, still there, untouched. But near the edge of the bed sat the suitcase, old, torn, still carrying the words, "Fly high, Ajegunle boy." And from where she stood, sweeping silently in the dusk, she whispered to herself, "I'm still here, and I still remember." The camera flashes blinded her. Too many, too fast. Nkechi squinted, lips pressed tight, standing beneath a grand white arch wrapped in silk. She wasn't used to lights this bright, not the kind that made her feel like a shadow among the living. Above her, a chandelier pulsed like a slow heart, suspended over a ballroom of gold-trimmed pillars, glass-topped tables, and soft violin music leaking from hidden speakers. The scent of jasmine, champagne, and money soaked the air. Around her, gowns shimmered, faces glowed, diamonds danced in ears and on fingers, and in the center of it all, Amara, a goddess in lace. Her wedding dress curved like water, white satin, backless, stitched with hundreds of tiny pearls that caught the light like constellations. She walked down the marble steps like she was born from wealth itself, bouquet trembling only slightly in her manicured hands. Nkechi watched from behind the curtain. They had draped her in a blue iro and jeel, elegant and respectful. But her shoes pinched, the fabric itched, and in her chest, something tightened each time another guest whispered, "Is that the mother? Not the mother of the groom. Just the mother." The music swelled. Chikezi waited at the altar, hands clasped behind his back, chin up, pride stitched into every fiber of his custom tuxedo. He looked 10 feet tall and 10 years older. Nkechi's eyes softened. He had once been the boy with torn socks and swollen knuckles, sitting in the corner of their shack, reading under candlelight. Now he was a man in spotlights, and the woman walking toward him was no stranger, Amara Okoye, daughter of Chief Silas Okoye of Ikoyi, heiress to Okoye Holdings, a law graduate from London, socialite, strategist, and the kind of woman who never walked, only arrived. They met at a business conference. Amara had been the keynote speaker. Chikezi was still small time back then, but he had ambition, fire, and she, in her own way, had always loved dangerous sparks. Their courtship was fast, their engagement even faster. Today was spectacle. The cameras cut to Nkechi as Amara reached the front. She stepped forward, smiled. "Mama Nkechi," Amara said, voice soft, amplified only for those closest to hear. "You gave me the man I love." Then, to everyone's surprise, she leaned in and kissed Nkechi's cheek. It smelled like vanilla, powdered rose, and something expensive. Nkechi felt her knees threaten to buckle. She tried to smile. Someone snapped a photo. Later, at the reception, people drank wine poured by men in gloves. The floor glowed, The ceiling blinked with stars. Toasts echoed from businessmen, ministers, celebrities. Nkechi sat at a round table in the corner, alone. She didn't touch her food. Instead, she pulled at a thread on the hem of her wrapper. Her hands trembled, not from age, not from cold, from something else she didn't name. The DJ called for the mother of the groom to join the couple for the family dance. She looked up, saw them swaying. Their eyes didn't search for her, so she remained seated. Hours later, after most guests had left and the champagne rivers had run dry, Nkechi found herself walking the quiet corridor of the private wing, guided by a steward. "The bride is in the lounge, madam," he said, bowing slightly. Nkechi entered. The room was dim, velvet sofas, candlelight flickering low. Amara stood by the window, veil off, glass in hand. "Sit," she said without looking. Nkechi did. Silence held between them like a held breath. Amara finally turned. "I wanted to thank you." Nkechi nodded, hands folded in her lap. "I mean it," Amara said. "Without your son, this company, this empire we're building would be a different story." Nkechi spoke quietly. "He worked hard." "Yes, and you taught him how." Nkechi's eyes lifted, cautious. "But now," Amara continued, walking slowly toward her, "he needs space to grow, to move forward." Nkechi's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Amara sat across from her, legs crossed, eyes steady. "I don't mean to offend, but the truth is our world now, it's curated. There are brands, press, investor impressions, public image. Everything is controlled." She leaned in slightly, and sometimes even the smallest detail can disrupt perception. Nkechi didn't move. "So," Amara said gently, "when there are events, media appearances, investor dinners, I think it's best you rest. You've done enough." The words settled like fog. Not cruel, not loud, but final. Nkechi's fingers closed around the edge of her seat. Amara stood, brushing down her dress. "I've arranged for you to have a private room on the upper floor. Full-time care. Anything you need. Truly." Nkechi stood too, but said nothing. Outside, the hallway lights flickered as she walked back to her room. Her steps were slow, controlled, like someone walking barefoot on broken glass. In the bathroom, she looked at her reflection. Her gela had tilted, her makeup smudged. She pulled off the earrings, cheap plastic replacements of the real ones she'd pawned, and dropped them in the sink. They bounced, hollow. She washed her face, then sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the silence in a house that had everything except welcome. The next morning, she rose early, wore a simple dress, no makeup, tied her wrapper in the old way, the way women in Ajegunle tied theirs when going to fetch water. She went to the kitchen. No one greeted her. She tried to fry plantain. A maid rushed in, flustered. "Madam, please don't. You might. The chef will do it." Nkechi stepped back, walked into the garden, watered a few plants. A gardener approached gently. "Sorry, madam. It's all scheduled. We have landscaping service." By afternoon, she sat with a storybook, calling to her grandson in the playroom. "Come here, Nkem. Let Mama tell you about the talking tortoise." Amara entered, cold, sharp. "I told the nanny not to let him crawl on the floor. I was watching him. With all due respect, Mama Nkechi, your stories are lovely, but I don't want him picking up old habits." Nkechi stood. The boy was taken away. She watched his little fingers reach for her as he was carried off, eyes wide, mouth crying, but silenced by soft lullabies that weren't hers. That night, Chikezi sat beside her during dinner. He didn't speak much, just smiled, looked at his phone, laughed when Amara did. Nkechi cut her yam into tiny pieces, No one asked if she wanted more. She walked back to her room in silence, and in the quiet, she opened the bottom drawer of her wardrobe, took out the wooden box, not to open it, but to place her hand on top, and whisper, "I see what's coming," then sat beside it, not as the mother of a CEO, not as the grandmother in a mansion, but as a woman who had once carried water through storms, and knew there are storms money can't stop, only memory can. The pot was burning. Black smoke curled from under the lid, rising in lazy spirals toward the fire alarm that had been disconnected months ago. Oil sizzled, popped, hissed like a warning whispered too late. On the stove, plantain slices shriveled into charred curls. The kitchen stank of something once sweet now turned bitter. But Nkechi didn't notice. She stood at the window, staring out across the trimmed hedges and imported lawn. Her eyes weren't on the garden. They weren't on the sky. They were somewhere far behind the glass, locked in a memory only she could feel. A voice called out, "Mama Nkechi?" It wasn't loud. It wasn't kind. It was the voice of the housekeeper, young, nervous, too polite to scold but desperate not to lose her job. Nkechi turned slowly. Her hand brushed against the counter, knocking a spoon to the floor. The clatter startled her more than the heat. She looked at the pan, the smoke, the blackened plantains, then at the housekeeper's face, tight with concern, tinged with fear. I forgot," she said. The girl nodded stiffly, eyes flicking toward the security camera in the corner. Later that day, Amara stood in the kitchen with folded arms. "I know you meant well, Mama Nkechi, but please don't cook anymore unless someone's with you. What if Nkeem had been near the fire?" Nkechi said nothing. Amara continued, voice wrapped in velvet. "We have a full staff. There's no need for you to lift a finger." Her tone was all courtesy, but the message was clear. You're not needed, not trusted. Not now. The next week, she misplaced her keys, then forgot the name of the street they lived on. One morning, she called the maid Ngozi, a name that belonged to her sister who died 20 years ago. Whispers spread in corners she couldn't reach. The nanny began closing doors more often. The guard smiled less. And Chekezi, he kept missing dinners. He always called after, always said the same thing. "Sorry, Ma, the meetings ran long. Tomorrow, I promise." Tomorrow never came. One night, she sat on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by wrapping paper. She had tried to fix a torn book for Nkem. She had cut the pages wrong, glued them backward. When the boy saw, he laughed. Innocent, pure. But Amara didn't. She pulled him aside and whispered something. Nkechi watched as her grandson's laughter dimmed. He glanced back at her, confused. That night, she cried quietly into the old wrapper folded beneath her pillow. She dreamed of water, dirty, heavy, sloshing in buckets, and of footsteps, tiny ones, soft ones, a boy running barefoot through the flooded streets of Ajegunle, laughing. She woke before dawn. Her joints ached, her fingers shook, but she stood, dressed slowly, wrapped her scarf tight, then moved through the silent house like a ghost. She opened the door to Nkem's playroom. The nanny was asleep on the couch. The child, curled in a ball, cradled a stuffed giraffe. Nkechi sat beside him, stroked his hair, hummed an old lullaby. He didn't wake, but his breathing changed, calmer, deeper. And then, without opening his eyes, he whispered, "Mama." Her throat closed. "Yes, my darling, I'm here." In that moment, she felt time reverse, felt her hands younger, her back straighter, her soul lighter. But the moment didn't last, because the door opened. Amara stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. She walked in, lifted the boy gently, and carried him away. No words, no eye contact, only silence. At breakfast, Chikezi finally appeared. He kissed his wife's cheek, ruffled his son's hair, then sat across from his mother. "How are you feeling today, Ma?" She stirred her tea. "I forgot the yam on the stove yesterday." His smile faltered. "I heard." "It's okay, Ma." "Oh, I called the driver Chinadu. His name is Musa." "It happens, don't worry." "I called the housekeeper by my dead sister's name." His eyes lowered. "I'm not all right, Chikezi." He reached for her hand. She didn't give it. "You know," she said, voice steady, "when I was young, the old women in our village had a saying." He looked up. "If the hands begin to tremble, let the heart be still. If the mind begins to slip, let the truth stay sharp." He swallowed. "Mama." She stood, walked to the hallway, then turned. "I want to see my papers." He blinked. "What papers?" "The ones in the wooden box, the ones you asked me to sign." His face went still. "You said they didn't matter, that they were just formalities." "Ma, not now. I remember what I signed. I remember what I gave. I remember what I sacrificed." His jaw tightened. "I want them." He stood. "Ma, let's talk later. You need rest." She stepped closer. "Or do you want me to forget those too?" He froze, then sat down again, said nothing. She left the room. Back in her quarters, she opened the wardrobe. The box was gone. She checked the shelves, the drawers, under the bed. Nothing. Her heart thudded, not from panic, from certainty. She walked to the kitchen. The housekeeper avoided her gaze. She went to the living room. The nanny quickly picked up Nkem and left. She stood in the middle of that house, her son's house, her house, and understood. She was no longer a guest. She was a problem. Later that evening, she sat on the porch, alone. Rain misted the air, soft as breath. The gate clicked open. A delivery man entered with a small bag of groceries. As he passed her, he paused. "You're the mother, right?" She nodded. "My own mother used to carry water like you, bent back, hands like stones." Nkechi smiled faintly. "She's still with you?" He shook his head. "Gone last year, but I remember." He handed her the receipt. Their fingers touched. Then he left. She unfolded the slip of paper. On the back, someone had scribbled a number, a lawyer's number. She didn't know who had written it, but she folded it carefully, slid it under her scarf, and whispered, "Let the truth stay sharp." Inside, behind glass windows and designer walls, her family laughed. She didn't listen. She had heard enough. The vase shattered before she hit the floor. Porcelain scattered across the marble like bones. Nkechi's back slammed the tile with a dull, sickening thud. Her head bounced once, hard, then silence. No gasp, no cry. Only rain slapping the windows, steady and uncaring. Above her, Chikezi stood frozen, his hand still half raised, his chest heaving. Rage hadn't left his eyes yet. It sat there, raw, electric, pulsing behind the mask of a son who forgot who he once was. For a moment, neither moved. She blinked slowly, the chandelier above her twisting into a blur of light. Then, as if nothing had happened, she reached for the edge of the console, pulled herself up, slow, measured. The bones ached. Her wrists trembled, but she stood. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. She just reached for her thin coat hanging by the stairwell, draped it across her shoulders, and walked to the front door. Rain poured like judgment outside, the kind that soaked through skin and memory. She opened the door. Chikezi spoke then, voice hoarse, unsure. Mama, where are you going?" She didn't answer, not because she couldn't, but because he no longer deserved it. Barefoot, she stepped into the rain. She didn't flinch, not even when the cold bit her spine. The security guard opened the gate without a word. He'd seen enough. She walked, past the garden, past the empty cars, past the columns she'd dusted with her own hands just weeks ago. The rain fell harder. Thunder rolled in the distance like something old and angry waking up, and she kept walking. Her coat clung to her frame, heavy with water, but her back straight, her breath even, her eyes open. Down the street, a single taxi flickered its yellow light. She waved. It pulled over. She slid in, didn't look back. Not once. At the law office, the receptionist blinked as she entered, soaked through, gray scarf plastered to her forehead, droplets falling onto the polished wood floor. "I have an appointment," she said. They didn't question it. They knew who she was. The firm had seen her name before, in margins, in footnotes, in old trust documents that no one expected her to understand, but they had underestimated her, and now she was here. The partner came out personally, tall man, clean glasses, a tie the color of dusk. He led her into the conference room, closed the door gently behind them. "I've reviewed everything, Madam Afolayan," he said. "You've held legal authority over Zionlink for 10 years. She nodded. "The convertible loan agreement gives you trigger rights." She nodded again. "You understand what you're about to do?" "Yes, this will remove your son from control." "I know." He studied her. "Do you want to add any conditions?" She looked at him squarely. "I want everything under my name transferred. Every asset, every share, every title moved to a new entity." He leaned forward. "What kind of entity?" Her answer came without hesitation. "A trust for the orphaned, registered as Ekwemi House." He blinked. "That's not a small gesture." "It's not a gesture." He waited. She reached into her coat, pulled out a plastic bag. Inside, documents, photocopies, the pawnshop slip, the original shareholder certificate, the golden share declaration, and the trust deed she'd drawn up weeks ago, in quiet. "I've carried these longer than I carried my own child." He looked at the papers, then back at her. "And your will? I want that drafted tonight. And your lawyer?" "You are now." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get started." The documents were signed just after midnight. Ink on paper, hand steady, voice clear. When she pressed the final seal on the signature page, the notary's candle flickered. She closed her eyes, breathed deep. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened. The wind had shifted, and with it, so had something inside her. 2 days later, a package arrived at the Zionlink headquarters. Hand-delivered. No return address. Tied with plain string. Chikezi opened it. Inside, a copy of the amended shareholder ledger, the golden share certificate, and a typed note, no signature. The hands may tremble, but the truth remains sharp. All is now where it should be. He dropped the page. Amara picked it up. "Read it once, then twice." "No," she whispered. He stared at the box, the documents. "The trust owns everything now," he said. She turned to him. "You need to fix this." His voice came flat. "I can't. She can't do this." "She already did." Amara's eyes narrowed. "She's a widow with no team, no board, no media reach. You think the public will support this? That we'll let her destroy everything we built?" He looked at her, and for the first time in years there was no fear, just a strange calm. "She's not trying to destroy it," he said. "She's trying to remember why it was built." Then he left the room, and for the first time, Amara felt the power shift, not in noise, but in silence. Nkechi returned home that evening, not to the mansion, but to a small apartment in Surulere. Modest, clean, quiet. She didn't take a bath, didn't change clothes. She sat on the floor beside the bed, lit a small candle, and placed the pawn ticket before her, burned it, watched the flame rise, curl, eat away the edges of the paper that had haunted her for years, then reached for the earrings, plastic ones, the ones the child had once handed her, laughing. She held them in her palm, tight, close, and whispered, "I gave all I had." The flame died, but her eyes stayed lit. The judge's gavel struck once, not loud, but enough to still every throat in the room. In Lagos High Court, room 3A, the air was so tight it seemed afraid to move. Every creak of the wooden bench, every cough, every flick of a page, amplified. The courtroom lights buzzed overhead. The AC blew cold over sweat-soaked suits and anxious collars. But at the center of it all, she sat still. Nkechi Afolayan, not in lace, not in widow's black, in simple white, headscarf neatly tied, hands folded gently in her lap. She didn't blink, didn't tremble, didn't flinch when the bailiff called the case name, Equuemi Trust versus Zionlink Corporation and affiliates. The courtroom rustled. Journalists scribbled faster. Phones vibrated on silent. The front row was filled with murmurs and stares. How could a mother sue her only son? How could a woman who once sold plantain now dismantle an empire? She said nothing. She had already spoken, in ink. Across from her, Chikezi sat hunched beside his lawyers, jaw locked, hands clenched. Beside him, Amara tapped her nails against her phone, unreadable. Her designer sunglasses sat on the table like armor. Her lips moved only to whisper strategy. But Nkechi was alone. No allies, no press team, no entourage, only a leather-bound Bible resting on the bench beside her. Aged and cracked at the spine, the same one that had once hidden a pawn slip. The judge adjusted his glasses. Counsel for the plaintiff, proceed. Her lawyer, young, clean-cut, nervous, stood. He didn't grandstand. He simply opened a box. From it, he pulled a wooden item. Rough, familiar. A box. The same one that had lived beneath a bed in Ajegunle for years. The clerk stepped forward, opened it. Inside, one BN Lai pawnshop receipt dated over a decade ago. Then a share certificate. Then a signed loan agreement, marked convertible. Then a sealed document labeled Golden Shareholder Rights. The courtroom held its breath. The lawyer stepped back, and then he said quietly, "She gave her earrings so he could dream. Now that dream stands accused of erasing the hands that built it." The judge turned to the defense. Counsel. Chikezi's team stood. They argued confusion, misinterpretation, technicalities. They spoke of legacy, of perception, of brands and stakeholders. They said words like misguided and mental strain and sentimentality, but they didn't say truth. The judge listened, took notes, then turned. "Mrs. Afolayan, you may speak." She stood slowly, every movement quiet. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. "I carried water before dawn," she began, voice clear, "through streets where the gutter ran deeper than our pockets. I sold boiled peanuts at market, carried sand in baskets, made akara with burnt oil, all to raise a boy who told me he would change everything." Her eyes met his, and he did. She turned toward the bench. "I never asked for thanks, not for a house, not for riches, but I will not be erased." The room hushed. I remember signing every page. I remember keeping the papers when no one else cared they existed. I remember giving my name so his could mean something. And now I give it again. But to those who have none. She sat. Silence echoed longer than the words. The judge nodded once. "Court will recess for 30 minutes before final ruling." People stood. Some left. Some stayed. Amara turned sharply toward her husband. "You said she wouldn't do it, that this was just posturing." He didn't answer. She gripped his arm. "You need to stop this, now. There's still time." Still, he said nothing. On the other side of the room, Nkechi sat alone. She didn't sip the water beside her. She didn't move. only reached into her small cloth purse and pulled out 2 items, a folded scarf and a tiny piece of paper with a child's drawing, crayons, rough and bright, a stick figure labeled Mama, arms wide, son behind her. She smiled and closed her eyes. When the court reconvened, the judge spoke quickly. All reviewed documents are authenticated. The Golden Share Certificate holds legal precedence. The loan agreement was executed without coercion, and the transfer to Ekwuimi House stands. He paused. Zion Link and associated holdings now fall under the trust's jurisdiction. This court finds no basis for reversal, Amara gasped. Chikezi exhaled, but it was neither relief nor rage, just release. The judge added one final note. This court strongly condemns the neglect and emotional exclusion evidence toward Mrs. Afolayan. While not criminal, it speaks to a social erosion that this country must reckon with. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters bolted from their seats. Whispers became waves. But in the middle of it all, she stood, walked past her son. He turned. Mama. She didn't stop. He stepped forward. Mama, please. She looked at him once, just once, eyes soft but distant, like looking at a boy she used to know, buried beneath suits and ambition. Then Amara dropped to her knees. Tears spilled from her lashes. Mama, forgive us, please, we were wrong. The courtroom froze. All noise collapsed into silence. Nkechi said nothing, just stepped past them. Only when she reached the door did she pause, turned slightly, and spoke, not to them, but to the room. To forgive is God's right. I'm only a mother. Then she walked into the light of the corridor, straight-backed, unshaken, but alone. The flashbulbs came like lightning. They snapped and sparked above the courthouse steps, blinding, bursting, insistent. But Nkechi didn't blink. She walked through them as though light no longer impressed her. Her white scarf fluttered in the wind. Her slippers soaked from a puddle she'd stepped in minutes before. She didn't fix them. Dozens of cameras followed her. But the only sound that mattered was the sound of little feet. Mama! A child's voice pierced through the noise, and then another. Then many. From the crowd across the street, children burst forward. 10, 20, more. Their clothes mismatched, some barefoot, others with oversized shoes. They ran without hesitation, arms open. They crashed into her like a tide, tiny arms wrapped around her legs, her waist, her hands. She staggered slightly, then steadied, laughed softly. They hugged her again. Some called her Mama. Others said Auntie. A few just wept into her side without words. She knelt. One girl, thin, scarred, with hair cut short, stepped forward, held something behind her back. We bought you a gift, the girl said. Nkechi tilted her head. Me? The girl nodded shyly, then brought her hands forward. 2 plastic earrings, cheap, bright red. The kind found in street stalls, sold beside candy and combs. Nkechi took them with both hands. Tears welled in her eyes. They shine, she whispered. The children beamed. A reporter leaned toward his camera crew. I don't think this is just a lawsuit story anymore. No one replied. They were too busy watching her, because something was happening that didn't need words. Later that week, the new plaque was nailed to the gate. Ekwuimi House had stood quietly for years, underfunded, overlooked. A place for children with no names on school records, no family to fill out forms. But now the paint was fresh, the walls repaired, the pantry full, and a new name carved in brass. Nkechi Home. She didn't ask for it. She had simply arrived one morning with a crate of books, a worn mat, and a broom. They offered her the office. She chose the kitchen, and on weekends she told stories. By afternoon, the hall was filled with children on the floor, faces tilted up, wide-eyed. She wove tales of tortoises who outsmarted kings, of rain spirits who lived in mango trees, of mothers who climbed the sky to feed their children sunlight. One day, while folding laundry, she saw Chikezi standing outside the gate, not in a suit, no driver behind him. He looked thinner, lost, his tie gone, his shoulders slightly bent. He didn't speak. She didn't wave. He left without stepping in. That night, she sat beside the fire pit with the older girls. They braided each other's hair under the stars. Someone passed a small bowl of ogi. She took a sip, smiled. Too much sugar. They laughed. A boy handed her a folded paper, a crayon drawing. Her, in the middle, arms open, children around her like flowers. At the top it read in uneven print, "You are our mother now." She pressed it to her chest. That night, she lit a candle beside her window. Not for prayer, not for memory, just for light. The next morning, she walked into the small storeroom in the back, pulled open the crate that had traveled with her through every home. Inside was the wooden box, the pawn receipt burnt, the contracts archived elsewhere. But the scarf was still there, the old wrapper too, and at the very bottom, one thing she hadn't seen in years, a small silver pin. It had belonged to her husband. She hadn't worn it since his funeral. She fastened it to her chest, turned to the mirror, then nodded to herself. Later that week, a local newspaper ran a headline, "Mother of None becomes mother of many." She never read it. She was too busy helping a boy with his spelling. Too busy teaching a girl how to fry yam without burning the oil. Too busy holding a child at 3 a.m. who cried because no one had ever sung to him before. One afternoon, while sweeping the veranda, she found something on the steps. A small envelope, inside, no note. Only 2 pieces of silver, the earrings. Not the plastic ones, the real ones. The ones she had pawned long ago. She looked around. No one in sight. Only the wind, only the sound of rain coming far off in the distance. She held them in her palm, closed her fingers, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel loss. She felt return. She stood in the doorway, let the breeze wash her face. The children called from inside. She turned, walked toward them, and left the earrings, gently, on the windowsill. Let them shine in the light, no longer sacrifice. Now symbol, not of what was taken, but of what was given back. Sometimes, the loudest love is the kind that whispers. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or polished words. It comes quietly, through cracked hands, through sleepless nights, through the silence of someone who chooses to stay, even when the world gives them every reason to walk away. There are stories not carved in marble, but in daily sacrifice. They don't make headlines, they don't trend, but they shape generations. And sometimes it takes losing everything, title, power, even memory itself, to remember what truly matters. Not what we build, but who we build it for. Not what we keep, but what we're willing to give. And in the end, it's not wealth or reputation or legacy that redeems a life. It's mercy. It's remembrance. It's the small, stubborn choice to protect what is vulnerable, even when no one is watching. This story is not just about justice. It's about restoration, about finding dignity in unlikely places and rediscovering worth not in what we're called, but in what we quietly choose to become. Because love, real love, is not sentimental. It is steel wrapped in softness. It is a fire that burns beneath restraint. It is a hand extended again and again, even when it's been slapped away. And perhaps the greatest strength is not in rising first, but in rising last, after everyone else has left. So if this story moved something in you, some memory, some ache, some forgotten piece of hope, let it stay with you. Let it grow. Because maybe somewhere, someone you know is still carrying a weight they never asked for. And maybe your voice, your presence, your small kindness could be the one that lets them finally set it down. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If this story touched you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected for more stories that speak to the soul. Your voice matters, and sometimes all it takes is one listener to change everything.